Well, welcome everyone. I'm really grateful to have you here and really, yeah, it's wonderful. Appreciate David and the We All California Hub for hosting. It's just as a little bit of context. This is part of this six-part series where we're going to be showcasing some of the inspiring work that's happening at the different state level initiatives across the US. And so part of this is recognizing that, similar to a We All Hub, a lot of these movements are coming under different banners, but they share characteristics of really trying to advance a new vision of progress, to build the power that's necessary to advance economic systems change and transformative economic agendas through multi-stakeholder coalitions and movement building, and doing all of this through very participatory and like democratic, inclusive processes. And so I'm thrilled that today's focus is going to be on Washington State because it is very impressive, y'all. Definitely one of the inspirations for I think us all to draw on. So you'll get to hear a lot more about this from the brilliant Lindsay and Faduma, but they have really what started out as this sort of challenge of thinking about a long-term poverty alleviation strategy, they realized was actually about equity and sustainability and well-being and the need for much more transformative economic and political transformations in order to ensure that that is done in a real way that gets to the root of the challenges. And so Lindsay is a feisty civil servant, an innovator in chief, who is one of the most brilliant and hardworking people I think I've ever met, as well as being very fun, and has been really trying to lead this charge on really thinking about how do you actually transform the whole systems of governance within the space. And Faduma is a very wise warrior who is with the People's Economy Lab and has really been a thought leader in the space around what does this look like in terms of a just transition for the economic system to move from being extractive to genuinely regenerative and equitable by design. And how do we do this in ways through transforming governance to be a co-governance approach of transparency and co-creation. Has been leading all these people's assemblies across the state to ensure that, yeah, those who have historically been excluded or marginalized in these decision-making processes are really at the center now. So I will leave it at this, but really grateful to have you both here and to learn more.
Wow. Well, that I'm going to have you introduce me every single time, Amanda. Really happy to be here, and I'm going to fly through this because I think a lot of learning happens when you're having conversations. So I'm going to quickly fly through this. This initiative. I'm with Washington State Government. I sit in the Department of Social and Health Services, the largest state agency in our state, and with dotted lines to all the agencies, the racial and ethnic commissions, and obviously from the screen, we work deeply with nonprofits, funders, um, philanthropy, think tanks, labor, tribes, non-federally recognized tribes, the left, the right, faith-based institutions, to ensure that Washingtonians can meet their basic needs, contribute their talents however they want to, and pass well-being on to future generations. This was co-created, this plan that Amanda referenced, the 10-year plan. It should be a multi-generational plan. Back in 2017, and due to the way that we did our book of business, it is now an executive order to implement the 10-year plan, and we are now about to iterate because the face of challenging times shifts on a daily basis. So how do we weave in current and emergent themes in partnership with all? Um, these 8 strategies that were in the 10-year plan still hold true, and I'm really, really excited that we have Faduma here to really go into some of the ways that strategy 2 is being lifted up and how we are learning and continuing to iterate. But obviously, you can see these 8 strategies that are imperfect, and we are about to weave in more environmental stewardship and some other things, AI considerations, as we move forward with the iteration of this 10-year plan. How we work from the government side is through radical collaboration. So often we program or project manage systems work, but it's really relationships. Like I can call secretaries or directors or data leads. Same thing within the community. Um, and when we disappoint one another, which we will, how do you stay in to continue this work? Um, on tomorrow and with weeks, ensuing weeks. And that's what we do. We do this through also evidence-based solutions and also innovations. How do we test both things? Alignment and action, people's lives are multidisciplinary, yet our streams of service and bureaucracy are not. So, how are we super intentional about working across pathways, across sectors, government, business, nonprofits, and constant learning and accountability? We're tracking things that have happened, what hasn't happened, and it's not a judgment call, it's just what's happening so that we can continue to move forward on the work that is rooted with those who stand to benefit the most from policy programs and budgets. So to date, we've made 275 policy program and funding actions. Sorry, I need to update this slide. We were the 10th lowest poverty rate in the nation, with gaps starting to close, but with the new federal and state authorizing environments, this is shifting. So I'll quickly explain that. And we are a national and now international best practice. Thank you, We All International. That a case study will be dropping here soon on our efforts. So as I shared, we're also tracking like the emergent things like with HR1, also people may know this as the big beautiful bill, and working across the system to say how this will impact Washingtonians. So we're able to quickly work with our brother and sister agencies to showcase what we know and the timeline of those impacts. So often we're hearing this is what's going to happen with SNAP, this is what's going to happen with work requirements, but we're able to quickly aggregate that and put it in an um, easy to read format. We're also able to quickly take the big, beautiful bill and showcase impacts to our plan and do the cross reference so you can see the intersectionality of the work. I'm not going to read this because I have 2 more minutes, but really, this work started with people who stand to benefit the most. And well-being seems to resonate across the board. So we were tickled when we were able to meet Amanda and so many other colleagues doing this work. So you can see that we have a history of well-being um, in our state. In fact, last week we got together with a cross-section of individuals to co-create where we want to go. Like really be visionary, and then what are each of our unique contributions towards that North Star of well-being? Rather than there's no way one sector can do this alone. We get in our way with alphabet soup and, oh, you're not perfectly aligned. If you have that North Star and you're all working towards that, you can get there. So super exciting. We're also hoping to have a new, uh, this has been, whether it's a future generations bill or a well-being caucus, those things were mentioned last week. So super excited about opportunities. Um, Obviously, so many people are like, how can you visualize the system? Just do one thing. But really, if you're only focusing on outcomes without looking at community conditions, you're never going to get there. You have to look at root cause. And all of these things in orange can be measured and tracked. And so, pretty excited about potential next steps emerging from last week's convening on how we're going to do that, whether you call it vital conditions, just transitions framework, they're all mixed together. So super excited. And sorry I went over a 1 minute, and I'm going to pass it to my dear friend and colleague, Faduma.
Thank you, Lindsay. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Perfect. Um, where do I start? Let me see. My name is Fatima Fido. Thank you all for having me. I'm a lab leader with People's Economy Lab, and I specifically lead the Collaborative Governance Program, which emerged from the work that Lindsay just shared with you, which is operationalizing strategy 2 of the 10-year plan. and specifically focus on transforming the governance culture. And so at People's Economy Lab, since our inception in 2016, we have spent a lot of time thinking about power, who has it, who doesn't, and how decisions get made. And more importantly, how we work with leaders who are committed to redesigning those extractive systems to more regenerative ones, specifically those that center the people, places that have historically been left out. And so that also includes restructuring our economy to think about inclusive policies, which Lindsay talked about, how we fund our work, and how we bring people back to the practice of collective governance. Next slide, please. And so we're working on a future where economies are community-centered. They're rooted in democracy, equity, and collective well-being, which Washington State is engaged in work to redefine what that means for us here. And so I think all of us understand that the economy isn't neutral. It's a series of choices. And the question that we pose to a lot of community leaders we work with is, who do you think whose values are driving those choices? Because governance without belonging just doesn't work. It's a reflection of whose values have been institutionalized, whose priorities get codified into budgets, policies, and land use decisions. And the current shutdown is an illustration of that. And so we call othering systemic. It's embedded in policy, language, and processes. So the stories we tell about how our society is built, how our economy sort of gives and takes from us, those are all processes and policies and stories that have been created. And so if people feel othered, if people feel invisible, if they feel disposable, unheard, no amount of outreach can ever build trust. And so in this work with Lindsay and the state, we know that belonging isn't such a warm and fuzzy extra that we think about when we're designing. It's about infrastructure. And quite frankly, collaborative governance depends on it. Next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned, collaborative governance is a living act of democracy. We have adopted the Partners for Dignity and Rights and Race Forward definition that came out in, I believe, in 2022, which states that co-gov is a collection of participatory models and practices where communities and government can co-create together. And they can both be formal and informal structures. And so that gave us leeway and to think about how we operationalize collaborative governance, specifically as a civic health measure. And for us, it really means that we trust communities to make decisions that impact their lives, and we can design systems that support that trust. Next slide, please. And so our initiative to operationalize strategy 2 was to be in partnership with one another. As we aren't born knowing how to govern, we have to practice. And so we build a coalition with community organizations, whom we call movement partners, and state agency. And we wanted to sort of test that if you follow community self-determination, if you follow community consultation, what would our programs, policy, and investment decisions look like? And we are pushing back on the harms of exclusion, like token engagement, top-down decisions, and lack of accountability. Next slide, please. And so when we thought about hosting community assemblies, we wanted to do that and thinking about building capacity, specifically the capacity to design together, to govern together, to sustain change collaboratively. And so we decided to invest in the people who benefit or do not benefit from our shared economy. And so in that way, it means that community members are not seen as stakeholders to consult with, but rather as partners to co-govern with. Next slide, please. And so community assemblies, we see it as an instrument to build civic muscle in order to listen, disagree, and co-create. Like Lindsay said, we can disagree today, but we have to come back to the table tomorrow. And it's not about getting everyone to agree. It's rather making shared decisions that honor the complexity that we all face. And so we looked at different types of assemblies, such as citizens assemblies, community assemblies, and we decided to go with a hybrid model that really balances power between community and government. Well, Lindsay, next slide, please. Thank you so much. And so we piloted 6, which we can have a conversation about. You will see 7 stars. That's because one of the assemblies was east and west of Washington. They wanted to bridge the gap between rural and urban. And when we launched assemblies last year, people showed up with more than just ideas. They showed up with strategy, with vision, and with care, and surprisingly, with a lot of clarity, and which reminded us that communities who are often under-resourced, under-asked, and over-extracted have the most to give. Next slide, please. And so for us, specifically at People's Economy Lab, the just transition is a living roadmap, and collaborative governance is the road we must embark on to get there. And so we know that it takes intention, structure, and political will. And so our collaboration is scaffolded. We have it's a bottom-up approach. So we center community residents, and then we work with community organizations to anchor the assemblies in place because they have relationships and the data on the needs of the community. We work with government agencies to resource, as well as think tanks or other community-based organizations like C4s or C3s who are doing movement built-in technical support expertise. Next slide, please. And so when we think about what collaboration requires, it requires a lot of patience. It requires a lot of time. And usually when we get funding at the community level, we have constraints like how much money you are given, as well as when you are set to deliver on those goals. So I would say those levers are pretty strong and they do confine. So I always tell funders, control how much money we get, and give us time to see how long it takes us to spend that money or how fast, or control the timeline and give us a lot more money, which the state gave us 2 million, but they gave us 12 months, which, had a lot to be aspired for. And we want transparency in decision making. Lindsay is always involved in our meetings. We just don't report to her. She's part of our conversation. So she knows when we're fighting, she knows when we're happy, and she's part of the kerfuffle of it. And then there's shared ownership of outcomes. It's not just community members handing off their recommendations to the state agencies, community organizations who are anchoring the assemblies are saying, we will also follow through on these. And then capacity for tension and difference is, I can tell you so much, but it has to be off the record and of office hours. And then we have to invest in relationships and not just processes. And that honestly is sort of the spine of the work, is that processes cannot be valued more than people. Next slide, please. I think I have like a minute. And so I think I said it before, but assemblies have been an instrument where we let people sit with attention. It's not just a one-time meeting. It's just not for an hour. It's for multiple hours, multiple days, multiple weeks, and sometimes multiple months. And so sometimes they're on Zoom, sometimes they're in person, but it gives everyone a moment to sort of share where they're coming from, hear and listen to others, go home, let that sit and marinate and gestate, and then come back and engage in a deliberative discussion. And so these are all images from labor unions, from community residents, from climate justice warriors, small business owners who all came together to align values and then be real explicit about the kind of future they want to share with one another. Next slide, please. Oh, that's all I have for you. Thank you, all of you, for listening to us, and we welcome any questions you have.
Wonderful. Thank you, Faduma. Thank you, Lindsay. And thank you, Amanda. You've definitely taught me how to do intros now. I'm going to first start off with some questions. Then later on, we're going to open it up to other people for questions. Mine are going to be focused more around the people that you're bringing in to participate, and how to build that network, how to build trust in that network. And a couple of people who are on our call have participated in local ones that we're trying to do assemblies here. Doug in Inland Empire, Stacy in Santa Barbara, and some of the problems that we've had in doing these events is how to find people who are willing to spend the time to come in. So maybe if you could both talk about the invitation and how you found people and how you were found people who were willing to give up multiple hours, as Faduma just described. So, love some thoughts.
Definitely. And so, I mean, Pell alone will do five by the end of this year. And so youth, indigenous communities, labor, union members who work all day, who need to work all day. And so we were really creative with the time. Given who the organizer is, they know when their communities have free time. They know when their communities are busy. And so we were able to leverage them. And so these assemblies happened on Zoom in the evening from 6 to 9. They happened on Saturday and Sunday. They happened during the day when folks were available. And so we were able to maximize on folks showing up multiple times because the recruitment was relationship based. We did not use sortition, which I know a lot of people be like, oh my God, what do you mean you didn't use sortition? We leveraged existing visibility and viability of organizations who have boots on the ground. So they know when their communities are working, when their communities are home. And for example, for labor, 50 of them were able to show up over the span of 3 weeks. And so that is also the added layer of time. You need time to figure that out. You need time to create the conditions. And some of them we moved around the dates and the sessions to meet that need.
Yeah. And to that end, what was the invitation to the partner organizations that got them interested in participating? Because so typically with a lot of partner organizations, they feel overwhelmed by so many things going on. What was the hook to get them to want to partner with you on something like this?
Definitely. Honestly, it didn't take a lot to get them to agree because we gave them design power. We gave them funding. We made the funding flexible. We didn't tell them where to spend, under what conditions they were able. And oftentimes we front loaded the funding. And so that is built on trust. Whether we're giving them $25,000 or $100,000, we did this through having multiple conversations with them. And they didn't have to do 5, 6 pages of an application in order to get the funding. They just had to prove that they had track record and the relationships to invest the time and the capacity. And so we funded their flexibility and their design and their sort of ideas which they already had.
Yeah, that's great. Lindsay, anything you want to add, Daniel Ball?
I just think it's about, Faduma said, it's showing up.
Yeah.
So often in this work of doing good work, like we pit each other. Oh, no, I'm doing that. No, I'm doing that. What? Just leverage. Like there are so many strengths in the room. And that's what's like eroding the public trust because then who do you work with? And then it's intentional. It's continuing to show up in the mess. It is messy. It is nuanced. And it's creating like the relationships, as Faduma said, across so many sectors so people can see themselves in the work. As she alluded to belonging. And that means like government leaders, that means frontline staff, that means people with the lived experience of poverty in Eastern Washington, to like the mountains in the Olympics. Like, how are you really reaching out?
And
And
David, I
it's
just want to add
like,
one last thing
Of course,
is that
please.
we had childcare, we had
oh,
transportation
and
available,
food,
we had interpretation, and we had great food.
food.
You, you know, when people, oftentimes, a lot of the residents were like, I'm surprised you're making all these available. And I always tell decision makers, think about when boards are convened, how much accommodation is extended. Why can't we do the same thing for neighbors, for community members? And so, for example, one of the organizations, because they were taking time during the day and the days when people work, they were getting compensated $75 an hour. And so, like I said, either control time when you're funding these measures that need community engagement or control the funding, but give them flexibility to really think about how to make the outcome work for
Yeah.
them.
And is there connection between the different partners that are hosting the community center? Or I believe, Lindsay, in your bigger schema, there's hundreds of groups that are participating. So there's two different things going on, and I'm wondering what the interactions without the centralized group, how are those groups interacting with each other, or are they, or is there a plan to sort of foster that in the future? Like, how are they um, networking with each other, if at all?
Well, I think again, going to Faduma, I think having a community partner answer these questions is really important.
Yeah.
But it is constantly like, what's the inside outside game for the push pull to do this work together? And it's like you have to evolve. There's so many people we don't know, and how do we bring them in to expand the tent? But our tent kind of, we have to get inside our tent okay to expand the tent. So I feel like Faduma, and I can call Faduma at 6 a.m., at 10 p.m., which I have. And so how do we start bringing in others? But like trust takes time. It doesn't happen after one meeting.
Yeah.
Maybe it did for Faduma and I, but I mean, that's rare.
Yeah.
I come in with a government stamp on my forehead, and sometimes it's taken me, I've had somewhere 3 years. They're like, we gave you dirty looks for 3 years. And I said, I know. And they're like, why didn't you call me out? Why would I call out? We have to like call in and be kind. And then now I could call her and she would do jumping jacks. But sometimes it takes time.
And just to add, when communities say no, they're saying no for a reason because mistrust is memory.
Mm.
And they're not competing for the funding. We're building a relationship. They're not applying for the funding. We're trying to create processes where we see who has boots on the ground, who's aware, and who can mobilize their capacity and their bandwidth. So we're investing in agency. And people know when you are trying to get them to comply to deliverables or when you're giving them agency to get there however
Mhm.
they want to get there. And so people know when you don't trust them based on how you're formatting the contract.
Yeah. And
Yeah, like we co-create every single contract with our partners so that there's no surprises. We co-create agendas. Like we just got together with 33 people. What would it be helpful for you? That takes time. People don't like, how many times and spaces have you been in where there was that intentionality, calling 33 people, what would be beneficial, what do you need out of it, and co-creating the agenda rather than that one person who holds the power or what have you, the leadership role, but actually sharing the work is a
yeah,
lot of work and it is necessary.
yeah.
And like, it can't just be also Democrats. How are you bringing in Republicans? Because then we're continuing the divide. And if we're going to get to that North Star of well-being, you have to work across all lines.
So I'm taking away three things: that it takes time to build trust, it takes consistency of action to keep showing up and doing what you're saying you're going to do, and sharing power. That's what I heard is the three of the main components you've talked about for building trust. Might you share, well, like obviously the opposite of those things, not showing up, not sharing power, don't build trust, but are there other things that are barriers to trust that you think are important to mention? And if the answer is no, that's fine too.
No, I think like some people just can't see themselves. Like business. We're not in the, no, we're accountable to our shareholders, not you. So how do we have them see actually when you benefit your workers and your shareholders and those who are using your services, you will actually get there. Oh, you actually ask for consumer advice, like in order to improve your product. We're like you continue to lean in. Oh, and you compensate them. We're now doing the same thing in Washington State. So, and some people you cannot bring along. Is that going to stop us? No, we have to continue to move forward and continue to lean in. Um, and it's again, it's imperfect. And so many people, well, I wasn't at the first meeting, so this work doesn't matter. We're sorry. Like rather than being like, oh no, no, no. Okay, we're sorry. We would love to have your voice now. So there's all these ways to show up, and we have not built our muscle on how to show up in the discomfort.
Mm.
Like I read Molly's little comment. We tend to do this, and like you said, we corner. Showing up and being in the mess matters. Building your muscle on how we disagree matters. And I
And was
could
that
tell
an
you,
imitation of me, Lindsay?
yeah,
Because yeah,
you gave me the hand. No,
right,
it's
yeah.
just, it's, I can give you so many stories of where I've been like just screamed at and I didn't walk away. And I had a colleague maybe being like, and peace out. I've been on calls where people started yelling at me and then everybody starts hanging up. So anyway, some other little things.
You've got tenacity. Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
or I've built my muscle.
Yeah. And Faduma, anything you want to add to the thoughts on trust or lack of trust or
I would say, yes, saying yes as much as possible helps. Recently, one of the partners was like, I haven't heard you say no. And I was surprised because there hasn't been a lot of things where I needed to say no. And for example, some of it was timelines. They wanted to add 6 months for reporting. They wanted an extra $10,000 because capacity has shifted. And I was like, sure, let me go talk to our partners and see what's possible. And they were really surprised. And so they encounter a lot of no's,
Mm.
community organizations, in terms of can I do this? So it's inflexible. And so that was a conversation. We're like, oh my God, I obviously I let them know that obviously not everything's a yes, but um, the yes, around 6 months of time to do more deep work of relationship and then report. Of course, that's a yes because we invest in people and our processes and an extra $10,000 for capacity. I know where that money is going. It's not going in a gutter. It's going to people and to create conditions. And so we have to learn to say yes a lot more if we want to do this work, and make no very challenging to say.
yeah. I've got like 100 more questions for each of you, but I'm going to be fair and share the time. But I want to see if Anna or Amanda has any questions before we open it up to everyone else. Um, any questions today or at Amanda?
Yes. Or Anna, do you want to go first?
Go first, yeah.
No.
And I'll
I have
build
a
up.
just a question which sort of like builds on what you were both sharing already too. So in like Vermont, for example, right? Like we have this coalition of 6 organizations and our current like we want to expand what we call the steering wheel. But to your point when you were saying, and I know that this might be a little bit different where it's like because of the convening power of the government, right? Like your original sort of task force that you had was, I can't remember how many people, but you just also mentioned that both of you brought together like 30 people this weekend. My question is around, do you focus on like the institution or the perspective? Like you want to make sure that there are representatives from these different types of organizations or institutions, or do you really, because it's relational, focus on the person, regardless of whether or not they are representing a strategic stakeholder, right? Like I'm just wondering about that, yeah, how you've gone about that. And then if you can share a bit more about your strategy design workshop like this past weekend, like what were the major questions you explored or anything else you want to share?
Great question. First is with the 10-year plan creation back in 2017, we were mandated to have certain sectors. So great. We were mandated to have certain agencies, like 10 agencies. So they had to show up. I mean, you didn't have to. Um, but we're very aligned. And we also understand that people are not, they are not their jobs, right? So people move. There's so much migration in this world that we're in with positions. So we're also looking for subject expertise. So you may not be employed, and that's okay because you come with that subject expertise. Or you may be in a different role. So anyway, we're very cognizant of a diverse group of stakeholders, especially East-West representation, like in geography and age and all of the things. Um, and we also know it's imperfect. Like we're also limited by our finances and who we can have in the room. Um, and I don't know if like government has that power to like convene. I think it's the relationships. People are like, oh, we want to be there. But some people won't show up to those meetings. So I think, the when you center the communities who stand to benefit the most in the economic and environmental and democratic, processes, you will get to well-being. But that takes intentionality with those communities. And so we rely on people like Faduma and organizations where Faduma sits to really have those trusted relationships. And we trust them to allow us to come in when they are ready because of the. So, anyway, Faduma, what do you think?
You know, one of our cornerstones is alignment. And alignment shouldn't be backbreaking. And so it shouldn't bring a tension between the person that we have a relationship with that's representing the organization and the organizational values themselves. So, and oftentimes, you can tell based on how, sometimes the person will say, "Oh, I don't agree with this, but this is what I need my organization to have," and oftentimes it's balance. But we have been obviously we don't want to meet with friends, with people that we know are aligned. It's about looking at the impact. Is this person showing up? How do they show up? How do they bridge? Because both, like John Powell says, both the bridging story and the breaking story are stories of belonging. And so oftentimes a little tension is healthy, but we look to alignment with the person's values who's representing the organization, who has a leadership position, with how compatible the values that they espouse are with the values of the organization. And those have been candid conversations because we are not trying to convert people to see this system as extractive, but rather they already see this extractive. They're already making their work and outputs and outcomes visible. They themselves have a door open policy already. We're not trying to get someone to sneak out of the window to attend one of our gatherings. And so there has to be some sort of viable conditions that we need to know that not only is the person on a human level, because they're the one coming, is aligned, but also the organization has demonstrated values towards this endeavor.
Thank you. Anna, did you have a question too?
Yes, I have many questions, but I will just focus on one. Thank
I
you so
know.
much. That has been fantastic.
Great presentations.
Absolutely. What really struck me was your persistence. And I appreciate what you're saying that building trust takes so much time. And I find admirable the fact that you have this approach that you want to co-create agendas and co-create contracts, which is absolutely amazing. The moment, however, when I heard you saying that, I was just wondering, how do you manage internally, so within your teams, the tension somehow of the urgency versus, yes, let's allow more time to build trust? Because sometimes I tend to think that you get the question, when do we stop? Like you're going to invite people again and again and just allow time to build the trust. But is there a point that you think that you just need to move things forward, or do you have a certain process in mind that it will just take as much time as it needs to take so that you can get to the outcome that you have planned or it's desired? So it's more about internally in the organization and the teams. How have you approached that?
I think it's through all the time collaboration. It is transparent. Faduma and I have had to work out our isms, whatever you want to call it, And she has given me the gift of letting me know when something has upset her, offended her, and I have reciprocated rather than avoid that. And we also have to try and do that with other partners. We're all moving like with the urgency of now, the crisis of now, the duality of all the multiple crises, with that vision and long-term thinking. Some people cannot come into long-term thinking because of the multiple crises, and so you have to respect that. So managing all of that and giving a lot of grace, extending a lot of yeah, I would really bring it down to the relationships. And um if I don't speak with Baduma for a week or 2 weeks, it's not because I don't care about her. She knows I'm busy and she knows she can pick up the phone as I can too. So it's having those like level setting all of that from the get-go. Baduma, I'm sure you have a different answer.
No, there's not a lot, we have disagreed a lot more times, but I don't think we can disagree on this one. The process is humanizing. When we
Yes.
think about the systems we have and everything, we have to put the human before. And so I also see Callie's comment. There are bad actors, and there are folks who are there because they're building a career path and they want certain things, or like they want decision making power or influence, and that is what it means to be human, right? And so having these relationships multi-year allows us to not only learn and evolve with the process, but we also see how others are learning and evolving with the process itself. And when you sort of center communities who are impacted with, hey, do we want everyone to have a living wage, dignified work, healthcare? If you have folks who are saying, oh, hell no, I don't care, then obviously we need to have a conversation. But oftentimes everyone says yes, they just have a different way of achieving that yes. And that's where you need to navigate. It's like, okay, would you say yes to this? Yes. Then what does success look like for you? Where do you think you can get this? What are your low-hanging fruits that you're pursuing? What are the long-term plans? Once you sort of identify that, there isn't much of a difficulty in alignment that we see, but they are bad actors, and we need to see that for what they are. They're ones who, have their own vision for what everyone else should do. And so I always say that this isn't a work where we need or look for leaders with a vision. We need leaders who can help others envision and tap into that. And because this is a collective journey and we're not looking for a messiah, or things like that. And that is a signifier of how collaborative or non-collaborative it can be. There are tensions with timelines and deadlines where we need to go fast, where we can't afford to go slow. And because we have relationships, I'm like, okay, my people, we got to sprint now, as opposed to we're doing a marathon. And that transparency has allowed us to sort of cash in those chips. But without that transparency, cashing those chips become really hard.
Yeah. Lindsay, did you want to add something else to that point? Or okay. So there's so much more to unpack. And Faduma, I really love how you express things in the language that you use. It's very resonant with me and I appreciate it. So just want to thank you for that. So we have time for like 2 or 3 questions from everyone else. Just go ahead and raise your hand, either your virtual hand or your actual hand. If you want to ask a question, just ask that it's an actual question. Erin, good to see you again. Go for it.
Thanks. Thanks, Lindsay and Faduma. I curious how things are going in 2025 with interest from communities and interest from funders in focusing on your work. On the one hand, we are overwhelmed by a lot of hard things, and on the other hand, maybe some people are more interested in this as a response to everything going on. Thanks.
Lindsay? Aaron, are you saying about assembly specifically or the collaborative governance models, or both?
Either, just like, yeah, thinking about how can we do democracy differently. Yeah.
Definitely. So, I'm an immigrant from Somalia. I've been here for the past 25 years, and based on everything I learned, it feels like democracy is unfinished work and that it evolves and it must be consistent and reinforced. And right now, our civic health is really weak. We see that in voting numbers, we see that in sort of city council meetings, unless there's a tension point, a lot of people don't come because they feel like someone else is doing the work. And so we need everyone engaged. One thing I would say is organizations have said yes to engagement. They want to put boots on the ground, they want to be at the table, they want to be listened, and they also want to listen. Oftentimes, the constraints we have is who's creating the table, how much time do people have to sort of gather with each other at the table, and how much capacity is funded. And those has been the most challenging aspects on making this work much more viable. That's why we need multi stakeholder convenings where there are funders in place where they know that they have to invest in an organization 5, 10, 20 years. Um, Oftentimes that has been hard. Thank God for Lindsay. She said, not only am I here as a partner, but I can also use my power to tap into resources. Because the rest of us, we're working on programming. So, Erin, I would say identify who your champions are in this work. And that just doesn't include people who fund the vision that you have, but who are willing to sit at the table to see those deliverables through, and then see if you already have partners who haven't engaged in sort of what I think Race Forward has a new tool called a tool for multiracial democracy, and it's about creating the tables. The tables we will all gather and sit and create the time and the space, and it's both symbolic and literal. But oftentimes, the symbolic part of building humanizing relationships outside of deliverables, timelines, or projects, there hasn't been a lot of investment in.
Yeah, and right now I think the federal authorizing environment has taken away a lot of dollars from the states. And then a lot of states are also in deficits and they're trying to make up and pull from different pockets to make up that deficit. And we should not rely on funders or philanthropy or like corporate social responsibility models to like make up that difference. So how can we do the book of business of like collaborative democracy right now to really meet the needs of people and planet or people in place? Because it's a crisis right now. So how can we do that and not um, just rely on the good graces of philanthropy when this is also why government was created to actually meet the needs of its citizens, especially those who need it the most.
Yeah.
So it's a new way of operating until we can get into a better model.
And I may have a question on that. Oh, go ahead, Faduma. Did you have something else to add? Please do.
Yeah, I don't want folks to walk away thinking, oh my God, this seems very, logical and easy. But it isn't. It's like when you're dating someone or you're married to someone, there are days where you'll be like, okay, I don't like this person. But you still have to like do things together. It's the same thing in our work, but oftentimes when we don't have that sort of family relationship, we can say, okay, I'm moving on. I replace it. And I think it's sitting with that tension to be like, oh, hell no. My values align with this person's values aside from what's happening in the moment. So we are not trying to sell Kool-Aid. We're just saying that sometimes it takes a lot more sugar to get it sweet.
Yeah. Any other questions? If not, I've got one more. David, come on off mute and
Thank you. It's not really a question so much as an observation. I'm calling from the UK where I live, but although in fact I'm a member of the of the committee of the All Irish We All Hub for complicated reasons. But I was actually sitting in a webinar this morning, which is about 4 a.m. your time, I think, on community wealth building. And this was reporting on work that they're doing in a poor suburb of one of our large cities, Manchester, where there's been a lot of development, but inevitably, because of the economic model, it's resulted in some people getting a lot of facilities and getting wealthier, and other people more deprived areas actually slipping back behind this inevitable consequence of the current growth model. But the point I'm making, I guess, is it's about learning. And why I'm sitting here now rather than having my dinner is because I think it's really important for us to learn from each other across the pond as well as within our own communities. So I know Amanda and Anna obviously will support all of this, but I think it really is useful to share experiences in very different settings. Of course, I know quite a bit about the circumstances in the States. My daughter is currently studying in California, and they're terrified about some of the things that are going on there. Um, and I have another friend in Oregon who's very much in the health sphere, which I am in, and we're looking at how differently you can tackle health inequality over in the States and then over here in the more, if you like, more privileged, although far from perfect,
David, pardon me.
democracies.
Did you have a question for either Lindsay or for Duma? Or
No, it's simply to say, let's get together.
absolutely,
that's the question. And just saying, it's really important to share information, I
yeah,
think.
agreed. Any other questions? We've got time for one more. Well, I'll ask one then, since no one else stepped up. So one thing that's different about the work that you guys are doing versus some of the other state work networks that are presenting, including We All California Here, is how you got, or how this got formed through the state government and Governor Inslee. And so what advice might you give to those of us that are not operating from initiation through the state government and not necessarily getting support from the state government to either entice them to join into our movement or to offer some of the features that you're offering without that backing and participation? And let me know if the question didn't make any sense.
Yeah, I don't think it really like where it starts. It's about the people and who's like facilitation matters. Who can facilitate, and especially when hard things happen, or when it's about, oh, you didn't say anything that oh, one thing.
Mhm.
We just always going back to what Faduma shared about othering, like
Mm.
that gets in the way. And like we also have to check ourselves. But there's a lot of great work happening in California that we also reference. And it is happening at the state levels in various like areas. Happy to share those contacts with you, but it's about the people. Like, who are you gonna like join hands with? And like, I'm gonna be in this with you and I'm gonna be in the mess. I don't think it matters that it was government. Faduma?
And there's only so much learning you can do. As someone who has like taken the long route through education, sometimes you just have to do and act, and clarity follows after. And then you tweak out, you engineer. Look at scientists. They build multi-million-dollar, and then all these people give them millions, and they fail, and they're like, oh, here's more. I think we have to appreciate that. We have to say we failed, but we learned this.
Mm.
And we have to put that lens. It's a mindset shift that we just don't have to experiment in particular sectors and sort of jobs. We have to experiment with each other. I'm one of 9 siblings. And so that should tell you that I have grown up with a huge, some crazy ones, some wise, but that is the reality of our work and who we are. And we need to stop separating ourselves with who I am individually before 9 a.m. and after 5 p.m. and who I am in the weekend, in the evenings, and at dawn. And I think that's all I want to say. I think you all know better. You know your lives better than anyone else. And I would say trust that and just act. Don't wait for permission and don't wait for someone else to do it before you engage it. Once I was invited to this work with Lindsay, and the first conversation we had is we don't want to talk about, our work and who we are through our work. We want to talk about who you are and can we sustain this work together because we align deeply on who we are individually, but also where we want to go in the future. And so humanize the experience and then go forth.
Beautiful. Well, thank you both so much for giving of your time and sharing the beautiful work that you're doing. I certainly appreciate it, and I think most others here do. So I just would love to see some visual representation of our appreciation. And also a quick plug for anyone who's here or watching that the next two are December 9th is the Puerto Rico Network, and then in February, Reimagining Appalachia, and maybe another one to be determined. But Lindsay and Faduma, any last words you want to share before we wrap up? Or
Please reach out to us. We would love to know what you're doing, and we would love to share, what pitfalls we have survived. But we would love to be in community with all of you.
all right. Well, thank you, everyone. Hopefully, we'll see you next month.
Oh, and we can send the slides. I know David is asking
That
for slides, so we can send them.
sounds perfect to me.